Hello everybody, this is Manvi Vikram Singh and welcome to the series of in-depth news analysis. Today we are going to discuss the important news of today's Hindu newspaper. That is, the date is 3rd May 2020. Now the newspaper starts with a very important news named as the states are scrambling from funds. Here the problem is a huge issue for the federal structure of the country because the states have to depend on center for the devolution of funds. You might have heard about the finance commission role is to allocate the revenues to the state among the taxes which are collected by the center. Since the center collects the taxes from the territories of the state, and also since the state machineries are involved in the collection of taxes, so constitutionally it becomes the responsibility of the state center to share the taxes with the state. Now here this article talks about the situation of the finances of the state. Like for example, it says that according to Reserve Bank of India study, central transfer accounts for about 47.5% of the revenues of the state. That means the state-owned revenues are only about 50%. For 50%, they have to depend with the center. Now, out of the state revenues, 90% comes from the taxes on liquor, petroleum products, stamp duties and registration of vehicles. These are the important areas from where the states gather their revenues. But currently you might have seen also that the situation of COVID is not much encouraging. So in this background, certainly the state will have to suffer a lot. And that is why there are certain states like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, and also West Bengal. They are requesting the center that to please release more and more funds. So the transfer of GST compensation, increase in the fiscal deficit limit from 3 to 4.5, and for higher ways and means advances. These are the demands of the states, that the center should increase the fiscal deficit from 3 to 4.5 to 5% of the GDP so that center can support the states in fighting against the COVID crisis. And also the center has not released the compensation of GST till date. So that should also be the responsibility of the center to release the compensation of GST, which was a very important initiative that should have been done by this time. Earlier, Delhi has raised the issue also that the GST compensation has not been released, but that situation was a different one. Now there is a crisis, particularly in the finances of the state. So certainly the center should be responsible towards allocating the money, particularly the money which belongs to the states, that is called as GST compensation to the states. Now, what is the importance of this news? The importance of this news is it can be connected with the UPSC GS paper 2 of mains, that means issues and challenges pertaining to federal structure. This is an important issue, particularly talking about the fiscal federalism where the states are more dependent on the central finances. And also GS paper 3 is shows related to planning and mobilization of resources. Here we have seen that how the states are mobilizing the resources with the help of the taxes on alcohol, tobacco or registration fees from the vehicle. So certainly currently in the issue of COVID, the states are facing problem in mobilizing the resources. So this news is important from the UPSC point of view, and these are the areas with which you can connect with the mains GS paper 2 and GS paper 3. Now let us see that what is going on around the world. See, this is happening in India. Uncle Ji is not wearing the mask properly, and this is what is happening. People are enjoying their life. I don't know what this person is thinking. And see how the King Jong-un again reappeared, and he is doing some Ganjam style in order to show that yes, I am alive. The complete world was thinking that he is dead. So this has been the situation. See, this is how the social distancing norms are being followed in our country. People are chilling here and there. Now let's move to some important news, and serious news of the discussion is, now again, once again, Nirupama Rao, she is the ex-ambassador of India to Washington, and she said that the government has although dismissed the US Commission of International Religious Freedom latest report, but certainly it is a cause of concern for India because India had been recommended to added in the list of countries of particular concern. Now this concept of countries of particular concern, which I had also discussed in the yesterday's editorial. It was introduced in US IRF Act. This is IRF, it means here International Religious Freedom Act, which was framed in US in order to find out that what is the global situation of the promotion of the various religious freedoms. So according to this report, which is bought by a United States of America Commission of International Religious Freedom report, which says that India is not respecting the religious freedom, particularly in the background of Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 and National Register of Population of Citizen. These are the two issues on the basis of which the US Commission has recommended that India should be added in the list of countries of particular concern. Now, the Nirupama Rao thinks that it is a serious issue for India, although it is not having any statutory motive, but still the relationship between India and America can affect because this is what happened during the Narendra Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. He was not allowed to visit USA because the sanctions were introduced against Narendra Modi, and also under US IRF Act, International Religious Freedom Act, if United States of America realizes that a country is of countries of particular concern, then within 3 to 6 months they can take a lot of initiatives against India, which include the sanctions also, sanctions of specified officials. Now, the United States of America recommendations, the Commission's recommendation is not binding on the State Department. That means finally on the list of countries of particular concern, the State Department of US is going to take the decision. Here, the United States of America Commission, which has given the recommendation that India should be added in the list, is not a binding on the State Department of US. But if the State Department of US added India in that list, it can have serious repercussions for India. So this is an important issue. Yesterday also I have discussed this news. You need to keep this news in your mind. It is extremely important. Now, how I can link this news with the UPSC syllabus? Important international institutions. Now, what is the international institution here? United States of America Commission of International Religious Freedom, which comes under United States International Religious Freedom Act, whose recommendations are not binding on the State Department, but still it finds out what is the situation of international religions and how they are being followed and propagated, and how the state policies are affecting their autonomy to propagate their religion. So certainly international institutions में इसको हम discuss कर सकते हैं. Now again, effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on the India's interest. Here, if the US added India in the particular concerned country list, then certainly the relationship between India and US will not be good. So it can be connected with the GS paper 2, effect of the policies of the developed and the developing countries on the India's interest, and also the diaspora, because a lot of Indian diaspora stays in USA. And again, it is an important news from the point of India and its neighborhood relation. Now again, please understand this thing. I think in today's world, sovereignty is a myth, because international countries and also international organizations, they put pressure on the policies of the various countries of the world. This is what is happening in the economic area. Like for example, this World Bank's ease of doing business report, and also this is happening with various reports of United States of America or European Union. Through these reports, they pressurize the policies of the country. Certainly in this background, we can say that the sovereignty in 21st century may be a myth. There is pseudo interference in the affairs of a country. From that viewpoint, this news is again important, because this United States of America Commission of International Religious Freedom, they are interfering in the internal affairs of India. To what extent it is good or bad, I'm not debating about that thing, but a country's policies and sovereignty should be respected. Like we respect the sovereignty of US, they should also respect the sovereignty of India. Now again, let's move to the next debate. Now the Shaktikant Das has started reviewing the credit flow and loan moratorium with the bank chiefs. This has been in the news recently on the newspaper. It is in the background to review the economic situation and economic feedback on the credit flow and liquidity situation. Now, why is it happening? Recently, you might have heard that mutual funds are not performing well because of an international mutual fund company started withdrawing its policies from India, Franklin Company. Now, in this background, there is a contagion effect. And certainly in this background, the mutual funds of our country are suffering because mutual fund borrows money from the investor. And if a big mutual fund company is withdrawing from India, certainly investors' confidence is going to be less, is going to be probable on the Indian mutual fund market. Now, the issue assumed significance in the light of the recent Supreme Court ruling that the banks need to follow the RBI guideline. Now, recently what is happening, RBI had said that the bank should give moratorium on the loans of the customers, but many customers have complained that the banks and other lending institutions were not extending the loan moratorium benefit which is being given by RBI. In this background, they went to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court had directed the RBI to ensure that this is happening. Now, the credit flows to the various sectors of the economy like liquidity to NBFCs, microfinance institutions, housing finance companies, mutual funds were discussed in the meetings. And some of the mutual funds also faced redemption pressure. What is redemption pressure here? Payment back. How, like for example, I borrowed 100 rupees for 1 month. Now the 1 month is over. I have to pay back the money from whichever investor I have borrowed. This is called as the redemption pressure, paying back pressure. Now mutual funds are facing the redemption pressure. This was again discussed in the meeting of the RBI governor with the rest of the bank fraternity. Now in this background again there is one more news was there in the newspaper which talks about the Prime Minister meets the Finance Minister for second economic stimulus package. We are on the verge of announcing a second stimulus package. If you remember, before some days the government has announced a stimulus package of 1.7 lakh crore rupees, and that is not going to be enough because various states are complaining that they don't have the funds. Now this 1.7 lakh crore package was in the areas of the food grains, cooking gas to poor and women and elderly persons, but that is not going to bring the results because the Indian industries are reeling under a huge amount of pressure. The mutual fund company is facing the redemption pressures. The NBFC sector is facing the crisis, and the banks are not getting back the loans. So certainly banks will also face the crisis of redemption. In this background, there is a need of a stimulus package. So it is expected that within few days the government will come with a second stimulus package, particularly for the Indian industries, and also keeping in mind about the micro, small and medium enterprises benefit because they are again suffering because MSMEs are more dependent on cash. Their day-to-day business is being affected because of the lockdown. So certainly there is a need that the government should bring the next stimulus package. Now, as I was discussing, the third news which is linked with the same economic ecosystem which is being debated right now in India is that debt and the mutual funds in our country. Why has the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, opened a liquidity window for the mutual fund? Now please understand this thing, RBI is not mandated statutory to support mutual funds. Mutual funds are working outside the control of RBI. If a mutual fund is functioning in the area of finance which is outside the stock market, then certainly RBI can regulate them. But still mutual funds don't have to keep the reserve requirements like the banks are keeping with them. So RBI is not bound to help the mutual funds, but still RBI has opened up a special window for the mutual funds, and the reason is the mutual funds are facing the redemption pressure, especially after Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund's decision to withdraw its operations in India. In the simple terms, a foreign investment company has decided to withdraw the operations in India whose worth is around 26,000 crore rupees. So in this background, this news is all about discussing about the role of the mutual fund and also the situation of the India, particularly in the financial sector currently, and how we are going to face the crisis kind of condition. Now, as I said that RBI is not mandated to support the mutual funds, but still mutual funds play an important role in promoting the investment in the economy. They invest in the economic system through the NBFCs or the financial institutions. So that is why mutual funds play a very important role in the financial ecosystem. So if the mutual funds are failing in our country, since mutual funds are interconnected and integrated with the complete economy, certainly you need to support the mutual funds. So in this background of winding up of the 6 debt schemes of Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund, which is having the asset of 26,000 crore rupees, the RBI has announced a package of 50,000 crore rupees for the mutual fund. Now, this money will go to the banks, and bank will try to invest this 50,000 crore rupees in those areas which are going to be beneficial for the mutual fund. These areas are corporate bonds, commercial papers, debentures, certificate of deposits held by the mutual fund houses. Now, why is it happening? Mutual funds are allowed to borrow up to 20% of their assets to meet liquidity needs for redemption or the dividend payment. That means they can borrow up to 20%, and the borrowing instruments are like commercial paper, certificates of deposits, debentures, and corporate bonds. These are the areas through which the mutual funds can borrow, and that is why RBI has directed the banks to utilize 50,000 crore rupees specifically for the support of the mutual fund industries. Now, why is it happening? Because the investors in our country, and especially after the winding up of the Franklin Mutual Fund Company, investors are getting skeptical about the overall credit quality of the assets, and they have started withdrawing the money. Now, what happens in the economy? In economy, everything is interconnected. Investors invest its money in the mutual fund. Mutual fund in turn borrows this money from the investors and invests the same thing in the economy. If the economy gives a return, mutual fund acts like an intermediary and gives back the return to the investors also. Now, in this situation, currently what is happening? The economic situation is not very encouraging in the country. So in this background, when the Franklin Investment Company or the mutual fund company, which is a foreign company, is going to withdraw the operations from India, certainly the investors are going to be skeptical about the conditions of the mutual fund. So in this background, mutual fund industry, which is extremely important for the country, which is having the asset of around 15 lakh crore rupees, should be supported by some window. As I said, that RBI is not mandated to support the mutual fund industry, but still, since the mutual funds are going to be linked with the credit situation of the country, financial ecosystem of the country, if mutual funds are not going to be supported, they will fail. And in this background, RBI is going to support them through the banks. Okay, so this is about the important news. How these all news are important. The 3 news which I discussed, like for example, the stimulus package of the government or the mutual fund or the RBI governor meeting with the banks. This can be related with the GS paper 3, Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. Now, this mobilization of resources also involves the financial resources, and mutual funds provides the financial resources in the economy. So that's all about the today's news. I'm not having much news to discuss about the today's newspaper, because this is all which was important for today's news analysis point of view. Now, one thing which is important for you is do participate in the news discussion which I am creating. I am saying that your enthusiasm is not up to the mark these days, because if you are not enthusiastically going to participate by giving comments and suggestions, subscribing and sharing, it is a futile exercise, because I don't like shouting and working hard for a cause which you are not going to realize. As a good student, you need to keep on commenting about the initiative which has been taken by me. Yes, few students keep on participating. I know the names of those students, but I know everyone who is watching the video. Your responsibility is to forward the same video to others, and also please comment on the questions which I give to you daily, because it takes time to make these news. You have a lot of responsibility. This is for your purpose. These questions are important. You kept on asking from me, sir, how to read the newspapers. That is the reason I am making this news analysis series. There is no other reason behind making this series of in-depth news analysis. So certainly you need to participate. So the question of the day is, which of the following statements regarding the state finances in Indian federal structure is correct? They generate more than 70% of their expenditure by themselves. Second, stamp duty, taxes on liquor and tobacco and vehicle registration fees are reduced to minimum after GST introduction. Third, tax revenues devolved through finance commission is a part of their debt. And fourth, constitutionally, center has the power to control the borrowings of a state in exceptional circumstances like financial emergency only. These are the four statements. You need to tell me which one is correct and which one is wrong. Now the next question is, consider the following statements regarding the mutual funds. They are collective investment schemes promoting investment in the Indian economy. Second, they are dependent on investor sentiment. Third, the Indian mutual fund market is facing severe crisis of redemption pressure. And fifth, RBI is statutorily obliged to satisfy the funding needs of mutual funds, as recently it has announced a selective window facility of 50,000 crore rupees for the mutual fund. So you need to again tell me in the comment box which one of them are correct. Now main question of the day is, what is the role of monetary policy transmission in the era of current financial crisis in India, and how the central banks are promoting monetary policy transmission? Now, monetary policy transmission is an important phenomena which says that the intention of RBI should reach to the people. That means if RBI is going to reduce the rate of interest, the bank should also reduce the lending rates. So if the monetary policy reaches the people through the bank, that means bank is going to make policies in the same manner like the RBI is making. This situation is called as monetary policy transmission. Now recently what was happening, few customers were complaining that the banks and the lending institutions are not giving them moratorium as being announced by RBI, especially for the COVID duration. They are facing the problems of loan repayment. So if RBI is saying to the banks and also supporting the banks financially that you please provide moratorium to the loans, the bank's responsibility is to forward the same thing to the consumers. And if certain consumers are complaining that you are not doing the same, you need to retrospectively think about the role of the central banks and how they are performing in monetary policy transmission, and are they really successful. This is not the first time when the government is facing, the RBI is facing the monetary policy transmission issue. In the past also, even after reduction of the repo rates, the banks have not reduced the lending rates. So monetary policy transmission has always been in the debate, particularly in the Indian financial system when we talk about, which is also the oxygen of the economy. So in this background, you have to write down the answer of this mains. Please do participate to encourage me to make the next video. That's all for today. We'll meet again if I see you are participating only then. Till then, goodbye. Take care.